The snow that winter fell like forgiveness, soft, endless, and cold enough to make silence feel alive. The wind swept across the open Wyoming plains, singing through the broken fences and brittle grass. Each flake seemed to carry a secret, and somewhere between those secrets, a small wagon struggled through the storm. Its wheels groaned under the burden of hope. Inside, a mother held her child close as the world turned white around them. The woman's name was Clara Wynne. Her hands, once soft from needlework, were cracked and raw from the cold. The boy in her arms, Tommy, slept fitfully, his face pressed against her wool coat, his breath trembling like the last whisper of a candle. The horse pulling them stumbled, its strength fading. When the wagon finally lurched into a drift and refused to move again, Clara climbed down, her boots sinking into snow that came up to her knees. She looked around, emptiness in every direction, except for a faint light blinking far off through the flurries. A lantern, she hoped. A promise. She gathered Tommy in her arms and began walking. Each step felt like a mile. The wind clawed at her face, tugging at her shawl, whispering that she wouldn't make it. But she did. When she reached the ranch, the light was not a promise. It was a test. The cabin stood quiet, almost disbelieving of visitors. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, his outline carved against the golden light. The man didn't move, didn't call out, only watched. Clara stumbled forward, the boy limp in her arms. "Please," she said, her voice thin. "My boy, he's freezing." The man stepped aside without a word. Inside, heat hit her like a prayer. A fire glowed in the hearth, and its light fell on the man's face, weathered, lined, eyes dark as the storm outside. He took the boy gently, placed him near the fire, and covered him with a wool blanket. Clara sank to her knees beside him, her breath uneven. The man finally spoke. "Name's Elias Crow." His voice was gravel softened by time. "You picked a bad night to wander this side of nowhere." Clara managed a faint smile. "We didn't have much choice." Tommy stirred, his eyes fluttering open to the sight of the stranger. He looked frightened for only a second before whispering, "Mister, if they come, please protect my mom." Elias paused, his gaze flickering toward the window where the wind howled. He said nothing for a long moment, then nodded once. "Ain't no one getting past me tonight." The storm roared through the night. Clara watched Elias move with quiet precision, feeding the horses, bringing in water, stoking the fire. He didn't ask where she came from or who they were. He didn't pry. And she was grateful. She hadn't yet found the strength to tell the truth. That her husband had betrayed the wrong men, and now the debt collectors came with guns, not ledgers. As the firelight flickered, Elias sat by the window, his rifle resting across his lap. Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, Clara wrapped Tommy tighter in the blanket, whispering soft lullabies that trembled with exhaustion. When she finally looked up, Elias's eyes were closed, but he wasn't sleeping. By morning, the world outside was buried under a white silence. The horizon disappeared behind veils of mist and cold. Clara awoke to the smell of coffee and the crackle of kindling. Elias stood by the stove, his broad shoulders framed by the orange glow. "You'll catch your death if you go back out," he said. "You can stay till the road clears." She hesitated, pride flickering in her eyes. "We don't want to trouble you." "Trouble's already here," he said simply. "Might as well keep warm while it passes." Tommy's small laughter broke the tension. He'd found a piece of rope and was pretending it was a lasso. Elias watched him with something between sorrow and fondness. For the first time in years, the cabin felt like it was holding its breath differently. Not just against the cold, but for the warmth of company. When they went into town a few days later, the gossip followed them like a bad smell. Miss Ada Malone, whose tongue was sharper than a barbed wire fence, whispered to anyone who'd listen. "The widow didn't waste much time, did she? Snow's not the only thing melting fast out there." Clara kept her chin down, clutching Tommy's hand. Elias beside her said nothing, though his jaw worked like stone grinding against stone. At the mercantile counter, when Ada's voice rose loud enough for others to hear, "Her husband ain't been cold a season, and she's already found herself a new savior." Elias finally turned. His eyes, calm and low, met hers. "Ma'am, the dead don't need defending, but the living deserve peace." The room fell quiet. Ada looked away. Clara felt something inside her unclench for the first time in months. They rode home in silence, snowflakes tumbling softly around them. Clara whispered, "You didn't have to do that." Elias shrugged. "Didn't do nothing special. Just tired of folks mistaking pain for scandal." After that day, their lives folded quietly together, as if stitched by an invisible hand. Clara mended torn clothes by the fire while Elias repaired fences and oil lamps. Sometimes Tommy would sit by the window, humming while snow fell in slow spirals outside. The world beyond the ranch might as well have vanished. Time moved slower here, and every sound, the creak of a chair, the clink of a cup, seemed magnified, sacred. One night, as the wind moaned through the trees, Clara hummed an old hymn. Elias paused in his chair. It was the same tune his wife once sang when the evenings grew long and empty. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The melody scraped against the walls of memory, and he felt the ache of her absence like a reopened wound. Clara's voice faltered when she noticed his stare. "I'm sorry," she said. He shook his head. "Don't be. It's been a long while since this place heard something beautiful." The words hung between them, tender and raw. After that, she sang more often, and though neither spoke of it, both began to heal in the quiet. A week passed before Elias noticed the footprints. They circled the barn, shallow and hurried, fresh enough to glisten in the moonlight. He followed them a few paces into the trees before they vanished. He didn't tell Clara, not yet. Instead, he began locking the doors before dusk and checking the rifle twice. One evening, while gathering wood, he found Tommy sitting alone near the fence, clutching a small locket. The metal was tarnished, the hinge bent. Elias knelt beside him. "What's that you got there, son?" Tommy hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a sketch of a man, Clara's late husband, and a crumpled piece of paper folded behind it. Elias unfolded it and read just enough to understand. A letter of betrayal, a debt unpaid, and a name he wished he'd never see again. Rourke. The name pressed against his chest like a bruise. Jed Black Hand Rourke, the outlaw who once rode beside him, long before Elias left the gang and buried his sins beneath honest soil. When he returned to the cabin, Clara was at the table, sewing by lamplight. The firelight touched her face, soft and tired. The kind of beauty that doesn't know it's beautiful. Elias set the locket down in front of her. "You should have told me who was coming." She froze. The needle stopped in midair. "I didn't want you hurt," she whispered. "You've already lost enough." Elias's shadow stretched across the floor. He didn't speak at first, just watched the fire shift in the hearth. Then quietly, "Loss don't scare me anymore. Letting someone die when I could have stopped it, that does." Tears welled in her eyes. "They won't stop, Elias. Rourke's men, they'll burn the world to find us." He nodded slowly, almost sadly. "Then let 'em come." Outside, the wind howled like something wild and ancient. Elias checked the rifle, loaded each cartridge with careful, deliberate hands. Clara sat still, watching him, the fire's reflection flickering in her eyes. Tommy, half asleep by the wall, murmured again in his dream, "Mister, if they come, please protect my mom." Elias turned toward him, voice barely a whisper. "Over my dead body." The storm outside grew louder, swallowing the night whole. Somewhere beyond the hills, hooves broke through the drifts, distant thunder rolling toward them. But inside the cabin, beneath the hum of the fire and the slow, steady heartbeat of courage, something new had begun to grow. Not love yet, but the quiet shape of it, a trust strong enough to stand against the cold. And though the snow still fell, it no longer felt endless. It felt like a beginning. The night pressed down thick and soundless, as though the sky itself were holding its breath. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, its last embers collapsing into a soft red glow. Elias sat near the window, the rifle across his lap, his eyes drawn to the horizon where darkness pooled like spilled ink. The world outside was all movement, wind tearing at the eaves, flakes dancing wild through the air. But inside everything waited, suspended between dread and duty. Clara dozed in the rocker. Tommy curled against her. The rhythm of their breathing was soft, uneven, human. Elias listened to it like a man trying to remember what peace had once sounded like. His shoulder ached from an old wound, a reminder of who he'd been before he'd traded the gun for a plow. He had thought those days buried, but ghosts don't stay buried long in winter. Then it came, the far-off crack of a branch, followed by the faint whinny of a horse. Elias rose, slow and deliberate, and moved to the door. He stepped onto the porch, the air sharp enough to draw blood from his lungs. In the distance, through a haze of snow, the glow of torches shimmered like dying stars. 5, maybe 6 riders. They were close. He turned back inside and touched Clara's shoulder. "They've found you," he said quietly. She stirred, the color draining from her face. Her hands trembled as she woke Tommy. "We have to run." Elias shook his head. "No, you won't make it far in this weather. The snow will give you away before dawn. You stay here. I'll draw him off if I can." Clara caught his arm, her grip desperate. "Elias, please. They'll kill you." He met her eyes, steady and sure. "Maybe. But not before I keep my word." He moved through the cabin, checking his rifle, his revolver, every round he had left. He wasn't a soldier anymore, but the motions came easy, muscle memory honed by guilt. When he stepped outside again, the wind had shifted, carrying with it the low murmur of men and the jangle of spurs. Rourke's voice carried through the dark, rough and familiar, like the scrape of gravel in a bucket. "Eli, don't make me bury another friend tonight!" Elias stepped forward into the open yard, the snow crunching under his boots. He didn't raise his rifle. "You shouldn't have come, Jed." Rourke emerged from the shadows, his coat long and black, his beard rimed with frost. "You're harboring what's mine," he said. "Hand her over, and I'll let you keep your land." Elias laughed softly, without warmth. "You ever hear yourself, Rourke? Talking about people like cattle to be traded? Don't start preaching. You were one of us once. You just got tired of the dirt on your hands." "That dirt's the only honest thing I ever earned," Elias said. The wind howled between them, scattering snow like ash. Rourke's hand hovered near his gun, the men behind him shifting restlessly. For a long heartbeat, neither moved. Inside the cabin, Clara pulled Tommy close and whispered prayers she no longer believed in. The firelight trembled over her face, the reflection of two men's fates written in its dance. When the first shot cracked, it was so sharp it seemed to tear the night in half. The horses reared, men shouted, and the torches scattered like fireflies. Elias ducked behind the trough, firing once, twice, forcing them into cover. He wasn't aiming to kill, only to warn, but warning seldom satisfied men like Rourke. Bullets chewed through the porch beams. Glass shattered. Clara shielded Tommy as the window burst inward, shards raining across the floor. "Mama," he cried, but she hushed him, pressing his head to her chest. Elias moved with purpose, silent and relentless. He'd always fought like a man trying to atone, never for glory, only to end what others started. A round caught his shoulder, spinning him sideways. Pain flared bright and hot, but he didn't stop. He stumbled into the barn, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Rourke followed, laughing low. "Ain't this something? You hiding in a barn again, just like the old days. Thought you were done with the devil's work." Elias's voice came from the shadows above. "Didn't say I was done fighting him." A single lantern flickered in the rafters, casting long, trembling shadows across the hay. The air smelled of smoke and iron. Rourke stepped forward, gun raised, his breath clouding in the cold. "She's got what's mine. That gold could have bought our freedom, Eli." "She's got nothing but a child and a grave behind her," Elias said. "And that's worth more than any gold." Rourke aimed upward, squinting. "Then you're dying for nothing." "Maybe," Elias said, his voice almost tender. "But not alone." He fired, shattering the lantern. Flames leapt across the hay, climbing fast toward the rafters. The barn filled with orange light and the roar of fire. Rourke stumbled, cursing, the heat licking at his coat. Elias dropped from the loft, the two men colliding hard in the smoke. They grappled in the fire's glow, two ghosts from the same sin, bound to finish what neither could forgive. Rourke's revolver went off once, grazing Elias's ribs. Elias drove his shoulder into Rourke's chest, knocking him backward into the beam as the flames devoured it. The timber cracked and fell. Rourke went with it. Elias staggered to his feet, coughing, half blind from smoke. His sleeve burned. He beat at it with his good hand. Outside, he could hear Clara calling his name, her voice breaking over the wind. He turned toward it and saw her standing in the doorway, snow swirling around her, face lit by the burning barn. "Go!" he shouted. "Take Tommy and go." She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "I won't leave you." The roof began to groan, heat warping the air between them. Elias limped forward, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "You said they'd stop at nothing. You were right, so don't let 'em find you here." For a moment, the firelight caught both their faces, his lined with resolve, hers with love she'd never spoken. Then she understood. She took Tommy's hand and ran into the dark, the snow swallowing them whole. Inside, Elias turned back to the blaze. Rourke crawled toward his fallen gun, coughing blood. "You could have had it all," he rasped. Elias knelt beside him, took the weapon, and tossed it into the fire. "I do," he said softly. "Right where it stands!" The roof split with a shriek. Flame and timber crashed down. Elias didn't move. He closed his eyes, thinking of the boy's voice, small and trembling. "Please protect my mom." Outside, Clara stumbled through the drifts until she and Tommy reached the ridge. When they turned, the barn was an inferno, its light spilling across the snow like sunrise. She wanted to scream his name, to run back. But Tommy's hand tightened in hers, grounding her to the living. Together, they watched the roof cave in, sparks rising into the black sky like souls finding their way home. By dawn, The fire had eaten itself to silence. The land around the ranch was gray and empty, save for the smoke twisting upward like a prayer. Clara knelt in the snow, the cold biting through her skirts. Tommy stood beside her, the locket hanging around his neck, the metal warm from his touch. They buried what was left of Elias near the creek once the thaw came. The townsfolk helped, quietly, without gossip this time. Even Ada Malone, who brought bread and left without a word, her eyes damp from something she wouldn't name. Clara stayed on at the ranch. She fixed the roof herself, mended the fences Elias had built. Each nail driven into wood felt like a heartbeat returning to the land. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt lived in, claimed by kindness. Tommy grew strong, his voice steady and sure. The boy who had once begged for protection now standing tall beneath the same wide sky. Years later, when travelers stopped by seeking warmth, they spoke of the rancher who gave his life for a widow and her child. Some called it foolish, others called it grace. Clara never corrected them. She only smiled and said, "He did what good men do when the world turns cold. They light a fire big enough for others to live by." Winter returned, as it always does. Snow covered the grave by the creek, soft and clean. Sometimes Clara would stand there with Tommy, listening to the wind rush through the cottonwoods, and she'd swear she could still hear Elias's voice in it, steady, calm, unafraid. We all ask someone, once in our life, to stand between us and the dark, and sometimes, if we're blessed, they do. They don't stay forever, but their courage does, echoing long after their boots have vanished in the snow. If you've walked with us this far, let the story rest a while in your heart. Remember the warmth, the silence, the promise kept in winter. And if you want to hear another tale of the West, one of love, redemption, and the fragile mercy between storms, subscribe and come ride again when the snows return.